Hello. Am I here or am I not? Let's see if anyone pops up, because it's just a connection error, so it might not. Oh, I can see someone's watching now. Not the smoothest start, but anyway. So tonight I'm going to be talking through how to do a simple drawstring bag. So I'm going to be adding some decoration to mine. So I've made one for dinosaurs. So it's just a really super simple drawstring bag. Now we are all getting on the move. I thought it'd be a nice thing to do for kids' activities, but equally they would be fab for popping in like your cosmetics or things like that for when you're going away, if you're going on a staycation. You could scale these up, and I will put some measurements on Facebook, on the sharing on the album with all the kind of dimensions and templates and stuff like that. And ideas for sort of this scale, scaled up ones for things like putting your shoes in and things like that if you're going on holiday, or when you've not got massive bags, and it's quite nice to put your shoes in bags. And then also some small scaled down versions, because it might be nice, little things like that. Might be nice to put in like headphones and Kindles and sunglasses and stuff like that in. So I'll do some different size variations, and then you've got a little bit of flexibility, because I know that not everybody likes a dinosaur bag. So the idea is that obviously you can put everything in it and you can take it on the go, but then also it turns into a bit of an activity mat, and you can get your dinos, your farm animals, your safari animals, your cars, your mermaids or whatever. And obviously also another really simple idea was to do the tic-tac-toe, the noughts and crosses bag, which if I remember, hopefully I will just show you how to do. So you can either just play with some decorative stitches on your machine, or just a little bit of felt or ribbon, and then collect some fun stuff to make your game from. So that is the dinosaur bag, and I'm going to flip the camera around in a minute. I will show you more detail, and I've just made mine from a fat quarter. So the dimensions of the rectangle you will need is 55 centimetres across, because there is a fold at one of the sides. If you've got two smaller pieces, then you can seam join them together. You'll just have to do another seam. And 37 centimetres deep. So 55 by 37. And like I said, I'll do one of my little squiggly diagrams and pop it on Facebook, and then you know what dimensions you are working with, and I'll drop it in the comments on this video too. So I thought this was quite a nice idea to put some quite bulky things in. I've done them in the past where they have been smaller when my children were smaller, and had little wooden farm and zoo animals, but I think as they're getting bigger and the toys are getting a bit bulkier, then this is a nice size. So the first thing we're going to do with this is do the decoration rather than going straight into the construction of the bag. You could, and you know if you watch my tutorials that I'm a massive fan of the fabric glue, and I probably will put some details on, I'm not going to lie, afterwards, to kind of pimp it up with the fabric glue, but I will be doing some of the decoration with sewing. So it's going to be fairly rough and ready. As always, I'm a bit slapdash, and I'm sure some of you will spend much more care and attention to doing that. So I'm just going to flip the camera around and show you the dimensions of the bag. So let's flip you around. Oh gosh, this tripod's stiff. It's been a while since it's been used in the studio, so please bear with me. We're on a bit of a wonk. Ugh. We're there, aren't we? So all I've done is taken my rectangle and I've ironed a nice centre crease, and that crease is going to stay as the side of the bag. So let me show you this dinosaur one flat. So one side of the bag is a fold, and then at the bottom we've got a French seam, and then at the side we've got a side seam. And obviously the idea is that you take your creatures out, or whatever it is your kids, grandchildren, nieces and nephews or whatever are playing with, and then you use the felt to helps create that sort of play. So I'm just really annoyed myself that I didn't bring home any blue felt for a pond for the dinosaurs. So I think that'll have to be going on with the glue. So you've got two sides that are French seamed, and one side that is that fold. So all you need to do when you are laying your fabrics on is be aware of your French seam. I'm using felt to create my decoration and my design. You could use fabric and Bondi web and do applique, but I'm just going to use felt for this because I think it's just getting a bit more tactile, and with some of the plants I've left them standing up so that again they can something else to play with on the mat. So I'm eventually going to take out of my bottom seam 1.5 centimetres and then 1.5 centimetres of my side seam. So I'm going to avoid that with the felt so it's not too thick and bulky, because a French seam is nice and smooth and neat. And I don't want to make it untidy by having loads of bulky felt in there. So I'm going to pin that on. I'm going to make sure that it's out of the way of my seam allowance. So for this, I'm going for a road for Oliver's cars. So I've just got some nice thin strips of black felt. So these are all using little bits of leftovers. Not sure what kind of road this is, but what sort of junction it is, but we'll roll with it. So I'm going to get some pins in, and I'm just going to trim down my seam allowance here because I don't want it to be too bulky. So there's all sorts of things you could do. You could do road signs, you could do little zebra crossings. It might be a nice one if you've got some little figures or Lego men or something to think about road safety. I know my children are getting to that age where they're getting a bit more confident, and they're not always aware of being the most safe on the road. So it might be a nice way of talking about that and learning, because nobody wants to get squished on the road, as I say to them. So I've got my main road, and I'm just going to add a few more details. I'm going to add some markings to the road, so I'll pin those all in at the same time. Now, the maximum thickness I think I would recommend going with felt is 2. I think if you start stacking it up too high, then your machine starts having a bit of a wobble, and it doesn't like it. So don't go piling up the layers on your volcano or whatever. To keep it fairly simple. If you are using the textile glue, it doesn't mind felt to fabric, but it's not as keen on felt to felt, so that's also something else to just think about there. I've got a little road sign, which would be nice if it was embroidered with, or we might have some felt letters on saying like 30 for 30 miles an hour. Let's get some more bits of road on. So it really is the tiniest little snippets of felt, so you don't have to get brand new big sheets. It could be the offcuts from letters if you've done like some personalised book cushions or something like that. I thought a mermaid bag might be nice. Daisy's got some little mermaids, and I thought maybe for when we go to the beach, it might be nice for her to collect shells in the mermaid bag, and then kind of use those for play, or even the tic-tac-toe bags. You could have coloured buttons, or maybe pebbles, or pine cones and acorns and things like that to make the difference between the noughts and crosses. So it really is something that I think the kids could use their imagination with. I know my kids will fill in any sort of bag with any sort of rubbish, I'm going to call it. Right, so I've got a few bits of road markings on there now. So depending on how lazy I'm feeling, I might glue some of those on. But I want to get most of my detail on now. Now, the only thing I found with doing my dinosaur mat is every blooming bit of felt on there was a different colour. So you might find that you're changing your thread quite often. I'm going to go with white, and this is my lazy reasoning, is that there is white road markings on roads. So I'm going with that, and I'm staying with it. So my stitch length as I automatically turn my machine on is 2.5, which is fairly small, good for constructive sewing. But if I've got like 2 layers of felt on there, I'm probably going to make those a little bit longer so they're that little bit looser. So I'm going to bring them up to about 3.5, just so it's not too tight. And just going through one layer of my bag, I'm going to try and, as neatly as I can, sew my felt on, and just making sure that I'm back tacking. So I'm going forward 3 stitches and then back 3 stitches at the beginning and the end, so everything's nice and secure. And I'm going to try not to be too precious with my roads, because I'm in fear of boring you all to death, so with sewing these lines on. So If they're not very neat, then my reason is because I'm trying to be quick. That's the excuse I'm going with anyway. And then just sending it 3 stitches backwards into reverse to secure it. So I'm going to do all my straight stitches. Now my top tip is, if you are changing and you've got lots of different colours to do for the main focus of your bag, is I'll just keep the bobbin thread the same and just change your top thread for this. So maybe for your bobbin thread, go for something that matches your base fabric. That actually probably looks a bit more like an aeroplane runway. I think that's just wishful thinking, isn't it? I think we're a while off that. Oh. So I'm nearly finished my roads, and then I'm going to have a little experiment with some of the stitches on my machine when I'm stitching some of the road markings down. So if you have got lots of decorative stitches on your machine and it's something that you don't really play with a great deal, I know I don't, it might be an opportunity just to get a bit creative and just experiment with some of them to give you some sort of texture and detail. So for my road markings that are flicking about all over the place, I'm going to do a zigzag stitch, I think. So I've got all sorts of, and there's lots on mine. God, this is a bit ridiculous actually. And in all honesty, I don't really use many of them at all. But it might be a nice idea. So I've got like things like leaves and flowers. So it might be a nice idea to have a little play around with some of those. I'm just going to go for a zigzag. I'm a bit boring. And do a nice big zigzag, which is number 4. It's a nice wide zigzag, so I'm going to go all the way up to 7, so it was 6.5, so it's really straddling that that road marking. And just kind of use that texture as a bit of a design feature. So I'm not doing all the reversing with my zigzags. What I'm going to do is just snip my threads off or pull them through onto the back and knot them off afterwards. Again, just so... Oh no, I've been playing Russian roulette with my bobbin and it's run out. Luckily I've got a backup bobbin. Oh, so the last 3 road markings I've stitched haven't even attached. So let's try that one again. I think we've all done that, haven't we? All been thinking we've been sewing merrily along, and then it's done absolutely nothing. So a couple more on, and then we will get on to constructing the bags. Of course, if you weren't decorating it, you would skip all of these stitches, skip all of these steps, and get straight onto the construction process. I think the highway code's gone right out the window on my roads. Right, there we go. And then one last one. And you've probably noticed that I'm not cutting all my threads off and securing everything. So I'm going to do that in one big fell swoop at the end once I've constructed my bag. So it looks a little bit hectic and crazy at the moment, but I'm going to tidy all that up afterwards. All I'm going to do is, because I've been pulling my thread across, is just release some of that tension in the fabric where it's just drawn up a little bit, so it lays nice and flat for the next step. So I think I will do my stop sign later. So now I've done the decoration, I can get on to doing the constructive parts of the bag. I'm just going to detangle my machine. Got threads coming from all over the place. So we're going to do the side and the bottom of the bag with a French seam. So a French seam is a nice enclosed seam. It's really neat. It means that the inside of the bag will be as neat as the outside of the bag. So you really want to make sure when you're lining up those edges down the side and at the bottom, they are really nice and even. Because the first seam you'll be doing will be really quite small. So if it's not quite lined up, then you can risk getting little holes in it, which we don't want. And then along that bottom edge as well. So I want to level off that top. Well, I might do that. I'm actually it's a bit wonky there. So what I'm going to do is to leave a channel for my ribbon to fit through. I'm going to measure a hole, and then obviously I can fit that drawstring cord through. So I've got my ruler and my iron off pen, and I'm going to be measuring 4 centimetres from the top of my bag. So probably even if you're making your bag a bit bigger, you might want to do the channel a little bit bigger, but 4 centimetres might be fine. If you're making it a bit small, then you'd probably want to make it a bit finer. So if you're doing like a sunglasses case or something, you'd probably want to reduce that maybe down to a couple of centimetres. And then I'm going to make a gap of 2 centimetres. So I've got one marker 4 centimetres down and one marker, which is in effect will be 6 centimetres down. And I'm going to use a very small, neat 1/2 centimetre seam allowance. So I need to go back to my straight stitches. Wrong button. I want to really slow it down now and be a little bit more careful. So none of that kind of bish bosh bash that I've just been doing with all my road markings. So really fine, skinny 1/2 centimetre. Oh, that's the wrong stitch. I'm going to do 3 stitches forward and then 3 stitches into reverse to secure it. And I'm going to all the way down till it gets that 4 centimetre marker. And then we'll do 3 stitches backwards. And 3 stitches forwards. And I'm going to take my thread off. I want to leave a gap in between there. So if anybody did any of the scrubs bags last year, or you watched my drawstring bag tutorial, this will seem a fairly familiar process. And then I want to stop at 1/2 centimetre away from that corner, and I'm going to pivot and continue that 1/2 centimetre along the bottom edge. Zip those pins out. Ouch. So if you've got any sort of frame fabrics or any little bits that are uneven on your edge, now is a good time just to trim them down, just to make sure it's really nice and neat when you do this second seam. So this is the kind of seams that I'd kind of advise on doing on skirts, and anything that you want to be really robust and to be nice and neat on the inside. So I'm going to turn my bag onto the inside. So now my right sides are going together, which is normally what we're used to doing when we are used to doing seams. And I'm going to give those corners a really nice but gentle push out with a knitting needle or something pointy like that. And then this next bit with your iron is really important. So let me just leave my dinos and all my bobbins. Stop sign that wasn't meant to be. So what you want to do is you want to really rub at that seam, and you want to make sure that seam sits right on the edge of your fabric. As you put the iron down, what is tempted to happen is that seam sort of tucks in, and those fraying edges are likely to pop out of your next seam. So I'm really being careful with this. I'm just rubbing that seam so it sits really, really neatly on the edge. Just all the way along. So I'm going to do my measuring again. Again, I'm measuring from the top edge, and I'm going to measure 4 centimetres down. And then 2 centimetres gap, which should line up with the hole that I've got there. It's a bit iffy, I think, is that? And can we need to be a little bit higher up? A little bit higher up there. Dodgy measuring. And this time my seam allowance is going to be double the width. It's going to be 1 centimetre. So by sewing these 1 centimetre, it should trap and catch that seam that I've just done there, all those fraying raw edges. I'm just going to get rid of some of this thread because it's driving me absolutely potty. There we go. So again, I'm just going to start at that top edge, my 3 stitches forward and 3 stitches back. And then nice securing stitches again, 3 back, 3 forward. So a very tiny baby seam there. And then restart at my marker. I just need to work out which one's my right one. And then 3 stitches forward, 3 stitches back. And then I'm going to go all the way along the lines that I followed last time. So you want to make sure that you are not going too far into here, and that you are going to trap all of those fraying bits, all those raw edges in that new seam. And then finishing with 3 securing stitches. So whilst it's inside out, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to have a quick peep and make sure that there's no kind of bits popping through. It's all looking okay. So if you've got any little bits like this that can be trimmed off, that's absolutely fine. So obviously just not taking it enough off that bottom edge. And just make sure you've got nothing peeping through down the sides of your seam. So I'm quite happy with that. So what I'm going to do is do the turn at the top. So I'm going to turn over 1 centimetre. So let's grab the ironing board back again. So 1 centimetre of fabric's going over onto the wrong side just to get me going. To neaten that top edge. Just want everything as neat on the inside as it is on the outside. I'm just going to do this by eye, but of course you could measure. Definitely need to measure there because that's far from 1 centimetre. And then I'm going to tuck over another 3 centimetres, so I'm folding over 4 all together. So you should find that your little gap that we left should be sitting roughly on the top. It will sit on the outside of your bag, but it'll sit around the top. So I'm just going to measure my 3 centimetres. A bit generous there. And then I'm going to pop some pins in. So what I don't want to do is sew this and the machine sort of push at that channel and then create creases where I don't want them. So just make sure as you're doing this that your channel, that your gap for your channel is going to be on the outside of your bag and not on the inside. I probably could do with a bit of an extra press. The only bit to be a little bit wary of, I would say, at this stage is when you are going round the top of your bag. Just be aware when you go over your French seam, and I'll mention that when I'm sewing it, because it is a little bit bulky because it's got quite a few layers of fabric there. So you might want to take off this box on the side of your sewing machine. It's a little bit like you would do if you were doing a sleeve or something, because we're going to go all the way around your bag. Now there is no kind of right or wrong place to start, because we're going all the way around in a big loop. But what I would probably do is start fairly close to the side seam, not on your French seam, but close, and on the back of your bag, because obviously predominantly it's going to be played with on the front of your bag. So if it's on the back, all that doubling over stitching won't be too noticeable. So when I'm stitching, I'm trying to stitch really quite close to this edge. So if you've turned it over by 1 centimetre, you want to be within that centimetre so that you trap those edges. Now I'm going for a couple of millimetres away, or you might like to use half a centimetre or quarter of an inch foot. So as I'm approaching this French seam, if my machine starts to struggle with that bulk, which it is doing a little bit now, rather than pushing into the machine and potentially pushing your fingers into the needle, if you just pull very gently from the back of your machine, so pop your foot down on the presser foot, but just slightly pull at the material, just gently, to encourage it over. Not too much so that it misses a big chunk of stitching, but just so that it eases it over that kind of bulk. Always put my pins the wrong way around. And then when I get back to the beginning, I can then join my original stitches and do all my securing in one. So that is all my machine sewing done now. So if you weren't doing the decoration, you can imagine how much of a quick project that would be. So now if you are doing something creative, is the time that you can really start to play. So you might add pom-poms or textures with yarns or bells and all sorts of things like that. You could really go to town with this to make it really creative and exciting. So just turn the bag the right way around again, and again I'm just going to get my trusty knitting needle and just encourage those corners to be as pointy as possible. So you might find it a little bit tougher where we did the French seam on that corner, because obviously there's quite a bit of a bulk of fabric there. And excuse the fact that mine is very messy, because what I'm going to do in a sec is just show you how to thread them through onto the back. So I'm just going to give it a quick iron. And I'm just going to iron onto the wrong side, just so that I'm not going straight onto that felt. The felt is polyester, so it doesn't love being ironed, but it won't matter on the back like that. So just to protect your iron, particularly, and the felt, I just do the bulk of it on the back of the bag. So I'll turn that off because I don't need that anymore. And oops, crikey, camera skills 0. And I'll grab my hand stitching needle and my ribbon. So what I'll do first is just guide you through how to pull your threads onto the back. So I won't do it with all of them, I'm just going to do it with the odd 1 or 2. I won't do it with that one because that's secured in. So thread, I'm just going to chop that in half. If I repeated the kimono, God, that eye looks absolutely tiny. Right, I'm going to rethink that and just get a bigger a bigger eye after spending about 10 minutes threading a needle on my kimono tutorial. So I've got my the eye of my needle, and I'm just going to thread that thread through. So it's a bit of thread from the road, and I'm just going to push it on into the back of the felt, into the back of the bag, like that. And then on the inside of my bag, I'm going to tie the spool thread and the front thread together. So I'll just do that one more time. So I've got my thread on the front of my bag. Gosh, I think I'm going to have to invest in a pair of glasses at some stage. Right. And then I'm just going to thread it down into my bag. And then just tie that in a knot, a nice little double knot, with my bobbin threads. Like that. And then I can trim that obviously off a little bit small so it's not as thready. And I just need to repeat that with each of my other threads. So apart from a bit of tidying up, my bag is almost complete. And like I said, I'm tempted to just do some extra details with the felt and the fabric glue, just to add a bit more excitement to the roads. But I need to add my fastening. So the piece of fabric that I started off with was 55 centimetres, so you need approximately that for the bag, and probably a little bit extra for your to tie in a nice little knot or bow. So all I'm going to do is just grab a bit of ribbon and spike it on a safety pin, and then push my safety pin through the gap that we left in the top of the bag. And I'm just sort of shuffling all the fabric onto the safety pin. And when I can't fit any more on, I want to hold the end of the pin and then just pull the bag back. And just keep repeating that until you get all the way around your bag. And then when I get back to the beginning, I want to just weave my way back out. So before I cut my ribbon, because obviously mine's still attached to the reel, I just want to make sure it's fully open, it's nice and stretched out, it's nice and flat, and then I can cut that extra bit off. Release my safety pin and just tie it in a double knot. And then I've got my drawstring in there. So, obviously, there's all sorts of things you can get. Oliver's quite into these Matchbox cars at the moment, so they don't have much paraphernalia with them, but some of the nice wooden sets have little lampposts and stop signs and all sorts of things. So literally just throw them in and go. So ideally if you're at a cafe or restaurant, or just getting a bit restless somewhere. So some nice simple drawstring bags. So If you were doing the tic-tac-toe, the noughts and crosses bag, you might want to start with the same size. You might want to scale them down and do them smaller. It depends what your counters are. So coloured buttons are nice, but like I said, it might be things in nature like seashells. Oh no, oh sorry, just had a poor connection. You could use strips of felt and sew them down in some of the same ways that I was looking at doing my roads with a zigzag or a straight stitch, or you could just use some of the decorative stitches on your machine. So if you've got some nice things and you want to have an experiment with doing some different lines, the only thing I would recommend would be to put some interfacing on the front of your bag where you're going to be sewing those lines, just so that it doesn't pull or distort your fabric. So you don't have to iron it on, but just a little bit of interfacing would just give your fabric a bit of stability when you are playing and experimenting with some of those decorative stitches. But yeah, just another way of maybe getting to know your machine a little bit. I know some of the ladies yesterday, sorry, I keep bouncing this, on the sewing surgery were talking about kind of getting to know the stitches on the machine, and maybe rather than doing kind of a boring stitch sampler that you maybe wouldn't really do anything with, doing some tic-tac-toe lines might be a nice way of just kind of seeing which ones you like and which might be nice for other uses. So hopefully just a little bit of an idea of how you can use up some of your fat quarters. I know other people before saying they kind of buy fat quarters and then they're not really sure what to do with them, or just a nice little gift for somebody. Now we are getting back into the real world. If you've got little ones who are bored in the car, bored at cafes or waiting in dentist surgeries and all that kind of thing, but some nice transferable skills with the French seam, hopefully. So I will put on a little diagram on the album on Facebook with all templates in for the size that I've used today, a smaller one and a bigger one, so maybe some nice ones like I said for the tic-tac-toes or your cosmetics if you're going away, or bigger ones for things like storing your shoes in. So hopefully that was a nice helpful tutorial, and please as always tag us in your makes. So next week we are doing a summer hat, and I'm going to do a little bit of a poll about that tomorrow, so keep your eyes peeled on that, because that will dictate whether I do a baby's bonnet or a bucket hat. So thank you for watching, and I shall see you all next Tuesday.